It's Red Eye Radio. Gary McNamara and Eric Harley talk about everything from politics to social issues and news of the day. Whether you're up late or you're just starting your day, welcome to the show. From the Uniden America Studios, this is Red Eye Radio.
All across America, he is Eric Harley and I'm Gary McNamara. Welcome and good morning. Thanks so much for being here this morning. This is interesting. President Trump announced Monday that Ukraine and Russia will begin negotiations towards a ceasefire and suggested the talks could take place at the Vatican.
Oh, okay. Okay. Well, remember there was, get
Putin in there for confession.
That's not going to happen. But there was the conversation there with Zelensky, which was kind of interesting looking. The two chairs in the middle of that huge room. Yeah, you definitely want it in neutral territory. It shouldn't happen at the Kremlin. But we'll see, where this goes and how far it goes. I still have zero confidence that there's going to be any concession by Putin because I don't know. But I also don't know what President Trump is saying to Putin or plans to say to Putin and what he might have in his pocket to motivate Putin. I don't know what that might be. I honestly don't know.
Just a guess.
Yeah.
Economics, because they've been hurt.
The
economy the last year of Russia's taken a big hit.
It's the only thing that, and I don't know what the concession would be, other than that, because if you're Vladimir Putin and you're losing so many in your army and they're, having to go to every means to get people in uniforms and boots on the ground. And the morale, not just within your forces, but in your public in general, is all but gone. There's only one way to bring that back, and that is to make it look like it was your idea, which, of course, I don't know how many people in Russia would buy, but you've got to promote the propaganda. You're the hero. I mean, that's the only thing Putin is capable of doing. He's not going to make it look like a concession. It's going to make it look like, well, they met my demands. And we'll see.
Well, I chuckled when Trump said, well, Putin wants peace. And my next thought was, well, yeah, under his conditions.
Right, which would include having Ukraine as a part of his country.
I mean, it's like, well, everybody wants peace.
Right.
Nobody wants unnecessary war.
Right.
If I have what you have, then I want peace.
Right.
It's the first thought that went through my head. All right, I figured it out. I think I figured it out. Why the Republicans, because it seems crazy, because Trump came out and said, before this that, not specifically, I don't know for the budget, but he came out and said the Green New Deal needs to be gone. The Infrastructure Act needs to be gone. All the Green New Deal stuff in the Infrastructure Act has to be gone. $800 billion of spending over a 10-year period, that's got to go. That's got to go. We cannot do that. We cannot be doing it. And all of a sudden, Republicans find that that's hard to do. In fact, we heard, well, there's been movement. Maybe half of the spending on the Green New Deal won't go through, but the other half will. And you're saying, why?
Yeah.
What is it?
What is it?
Ooh. I'm raising my hand. I have the answer.
Okay.
Because they're talking about these projects that are already started. It might be a 8-year or 9-year construction of these things where they're getting money every single year. So they've got 30% of it done or 40% of it done, and the money cuts off. Well, that money, all that government money adds to the GDP. You cut it off, that creates negative GDP in all those areas. And right now they're looking for anything that's pro-growth because they know, Republicans know, that a ton of the tax cuts are not pro-growth, and money that's already being spent by the government adds to the GDP, and they're doing anything to temporarily keep the GDP up. That would be my guess.
Yeah.
Because as we know, it shouldn't be the case, but government money, spending, because you think about it, you're spending money. This is where we look at how the GDP, one of the things, and trying to simplify it, and there was a change made about 15 years ago where the movement of money counted more for the GDP. We looked at it and said, okay, so the government is taking taxpayer dollars and spending it to give to a company to subsidize a product that they cannot make a profit on. And odds are it will go bankrupt. But you need to spend the money in order to save the planet, and you also wish to spend the money because that's spending the money, not creating wealth, but the spending of that money alone creates positive GDP, even if they can never produce a profit. That, to us, is the flaw in GDP and how it's figured out. If you're talking durable goods or increase in services that you can qualify and quantify, that's a different point because you're producing those things, without subsidies at a profit. Yeah. Because what really drives the GDP is a creation of wealth, not the movement of money.
Right.
Excuse me. Did I say the correct? What creates not GDP? What creates true economic growth?
Growth, yeah.
And that isn't necessarily GDP. What creates true economic growth is producing a legitimate product or service that's sold to the public that you make a profit on.
Yeah, because it's what constitutes GDP growth these days isn't all growth.
I dare say that some GDP growth is actually a drag on economic growth.
I think we could make that argument.
Yeah. When you're spending taxpayer dollars, and we're not talking about tax breaks. We're talking about taking taxpayer dollars and putting it into an industry that's never going to make a profit unless it's continually subsidized by the government. To us, that's a drag on GDP because you're taking money that could be used for productive purposes in investment or whatever, buying things, and you're turning it into negative economic growth that cannot survive without subsidies. And so that's why I look at it and that's been the biggest criticism from conservative economists. This really isn't a pro-growth bill. Because even the tax breaks aren't the kind of tax breaks that cause investment.
Yeah.
That really get people to do it. You talk about 100% expensing, for companies and things like that. Yeah, you talk about capital gains reductions, things like that. So the conservative economists are looking for, where's the economic growth going to be? Well, if you're worried you can't get economic growth, yet you need to be able to show the label of economic growth, which most people view as a GDP, even if it isn't always. Well, then you want that money to continue to pour in for those green energy projects, especially those that are currently being constructed.
Right.
Where the money is flowing in there each and every week, each and every day. Jobs, they already have the job. The jobs are there already. This isn't a future project 5 years from now. People are already working. You take that out, the people are no longer working. It shuts down. And that money, by the time, it may take a while to find itself back into the private sector again. And it may be stretched out over a longer period of time, and the negative economic impact may be more immediate because the money is pulled now on all these projects. Let's say you say, okay, the bill passes July 4th. Okay, let's say the Senate does it. And you've got, I'm just throwing this out, $50 billion right now that is in projects that money's being flowed in, $50 billion in the next year is being put in, and there's 12,000 people that are employed because of that, even though there's no profit being made because it's money and a lot of it being borrowed that is, again, going to have to be paid back, and the interest on that is going to make that a wash on economic growth.
Mm-hmm.
But you're pounding that into something that can never make a profit unless there are massive subsidies. You're going to end the subsidies to begin with, so you see where the decline is going at that point. But you want that money going in because it gives you that label of positive economic growth in the upcoming year, because you know you don't have anything else in that budget that you trust that is going to give that economic boost to you.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. It's,
But hey, it's just that's just I'm speculating, but I think it's pretty good speculation.
No, I think it is. I really think it's, again, when we talk about GDP growth, when we talk about real growth, the way that they've changed measuring GDP in recent years has become overly frustrating, because we really should be measuring true growth. The movement of money, government spending, and everything else. Sorry, that's not growth. You're talking about, again, as you mentioned, the movement of money.
And how do you accurately give? What is the algorithm? What is the math behind giving what is, we view, true economic growth? No subsidies. You're producing a product. People are buying it. You're making a profit. What is the algorithm for that as a sign of economic growth versus throwing taxpayer dollars and taking it away from productive purposes and putting it into an economic toilet that you're going to flush?
Yeah, right.
That's the only thing. I don't know why the toilet came to.
Yeah, well,
to be. Oh, that's where you flush waste.
Mm-hmm.
And how do you figure out the difference, in there? Because if you can look at it and say, if you give a tax break to a company, that company gets the tax break because they're making a profit.
Yeah. Right.
It's not like, okay, we're going to reward you or give you a tax credit for not making a profit.
Right.
We're not going to give you dollars for not making a profit.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to take less if you make a profit. There's the incentive to grow more.
Right. Yeah. Well, the pro-growth policy, aside from being fiscally responsible and reducing spending, pro-growth policy is necessary. And in this round, it's not pro-growth policy. We're not seeing that kind of,
right.
Because if you were focused on that, you'd be focused on the rates. You wouldn't be cherry picking.
The marginal
you wouldn't
rates,
be,
right,
the marginal rates would be what drives everything in pro-growth, which when you have pro-growth, then it lifts everybody, benefits everybody.
And nothing would be temporary.
Right. You don't need a sunset. In fact, there never should be a sunset on pro-growth policy. Well, the reason they have to be temporary, they have to put a sunset on these items, is because they know they're not sustainable. So you move it, you kick the ball down the field to a field you're no longer going to be playing on at that time. And then when you get to that point, if you're still a member of the House, you just say, well, I can't believe they did this. We're going to have to fix it now. Kick down the field once again.
Doggone it, I'm going to write a book on the deficit.
That's right.
Hey, Jake Tapper did it. Not on the deficit, but he did it.
Yeah.
I'll do it. I was the cause of the problem. Now let me write a book about what the problem is.
They lied to me.
But not include myself.
Right, exactly. I can't believe they did this.
866-90 Red Eye.
This morning's USDA Farm Report is brought to you by Howes Products. Tested, trusted, guaranteed since 1920.
Higher production.
The driver behind USDA's May look at 2025 dairy production and price forecast, as well as the initial outlook for the 2026 calendar year. According to World Agricultural Outlook Board Chair Mark Jekanowski,
Mainly driven by increased cow inventories, but also some growth in milk per cow as well.
with next year's projected milk production to be up 600 million pounds year over year. Skim solid dairy exports are expected up in 2026, as well as increased domestic use both this year and next. Turning to dairy price forecast,
2025 all milk price forecast was raised by 50 cents per hundredweight. It's now at $21.60 per hundredweight.
based on observed price strength, while the all milk price for next year is lowered 45 cents to $21.15 a hundredweight based on increased production. I'm Ron Bain reporting for the U.S. Department of Agriculture in Washington, D.C.
This report brought to you by Cenex Fuels and Lubes.
Coming up, more with Gary McNamara and Eric Harley. It's Red Eye Radio.
It's Red Eye Radio. He's Eric Harley, and I'm Gary McNamara. We have a number of audio cuts of the day coming up here.
Yeah, right.
But we want to go to this audio cut because this is one of the most important questions of the day that had to be answered by the White House, asked yesterday by Peter Doocy of Fox News.
The last one. What does President Trump mean when he says that Taylor Swift is no longer hot?
Look, he is speaking about Taylor Swift's political views and how perhaps it has impacted the support of the American public for her work, and I will leave it at that.
Thanks, Peter.
I have a different take on it. When I said she's no longer hot. Yeah.
What we meant was...
Yeah. She's no longer hot. You know, as in being hot.
Temperature-wise, we're talking. Temperature.
No.
Temperature.
No, not temperature. Nope, that's not it.
Oh, my gosh, that was funny.
Yeah.
Was really...
Well, it made, because I saw that come up yesterday, and it made me wonder, are we still talking Taylor Swift? And then my second question, why are we still talking Taylor Swift?
I wanted to hit one thing that I saw yesterday. This was written. Britt Hume wrote this, and I did like it. He said, "Remember this when you hear endlessly that the GOP tax cuts will only benefit the rich." About 40% of U.S. households, and I think it's 50%, almost 50% of taxpayers, but about 40% of U.S. households pay zero federal income tax. It's not easy to design a tax cut for people who don't pay any taxes.
Yeah.
Trump has tried proposing no tax on tips, overtime, and Social Security, but the underlying reality remains tax cuts. I just love this here because it's such a duh,
Right.
but it's an important duh. But the underlying reality remains tax cuts inevitably benefit those who pay taxes.
No. Is that how it works?
That's how it works.
Oh.
Yes.
I had it wrong then.
Damn administration, I didn't get a tax cut. How much did you pay in taxes last year?
None.
Well, actually, I got $600 back from the income tax credit.
Exactly.
So, and they didn't give me $300 more, so I didn't get a tax.
That's not a tax cut.
I didn't get a tax cut.
Right.
You're listening to Red Eye Radio from the Uniden America Studios.
It's Friday Radio. He's Eric Harley, and I'm Gary McNamara. Welcome and good morning. Okay, a number of audio cuts of the day, but you got to combine them all at once.
All right.
Because I don't consider the first one like an audio cut of the day, but it helps lead to the other ones.
Okay.
This is House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries talking about the fact of the Republicans peddling conspiracy theories about Joe Biden's decline.
Mm-hmm.
And this was yesterday morning.
Yeah.
All right, so here we go.
My expectation that President Biden is going to meet this moment with the courage and resilience that he's consistently shown. Seems to me entirely inappropriate that at this moment in time, when President Biden is dealing with a serious and aggressive form of cancer, there are Republicans who are peddling conspiracy theories. And
there you go.
Mm-hmm.
And so let's go to the Republicans throwing out the conspiracy theories like Joe Scarborough on MSNBC and Ezekiel Emanuel, the doctor, oncologist, been a prominent leader of the Democratic Party for a significant period of time. Rahm Emanuel's brother. He is also considered, isn't he considered, didn't they label him the architect of Obamacare?
Yes.
So not exactly Republican right-wing conspiracy theorist, Mr. Jeffries.
No.
Here's part of this conversation.
You believe it is likely, if this prostate cancer has spread to the bone, that he could have had it for up to a decade, but certainly it's likely. Would it be fair to say it's likely to have had this for at least several years?
Oh, more than several years. You don't get prostate cancer.
So I just want to stop you. So this is not speculation. If you have prostate cancer that is spread to the bone, then he's most certainly, you were saying, had it when he was president of the United States.
Oh, yeah. He did not develop it in the last 100, 200 days. He had it while he was president. He probably had it at the start of his presidency in 2021. Yes, that I don't think there's any disagreement about that.
And I'm just curious again, if your doctor to a president of the United States that is a male, that is an older man, would a prostate test, and again, we're just talking about a PSA screening, a blood test that you could do along with all the other blood tests. It's not even that it would be intrusive. Would this not be one of the first tests that you would conduct as a White House doctor?
If you're a White House doctor in this situation, I think you would certainly discuss it with the president and talk about the pros and cons. I think if you then ask, well, if President Biden says, well, if I'm your father, which patients often do, what would you recommend? I think the fact is that most White House doctors would recommend getting the test. And again, the evidence is, look at President Obama, President Bush, younger than President Biden, and they both got the test.
You believe?
And so did Trump. Trump also got the test. Let me find that audio here. Because, again, this was with, Joe Scarborough. Make sure I have the right one here. Here it is. This is Dr. Vin Gupta on with Joe Scarborough. Okay.
Going to run for president for another 4 years. Obviously, the PSA exam is not 100% accurate, and I've never met a doctor that doesn't say you needed to do the PSA exam and also have the physical exam as well. I just find it hard to believe that any White House physician wouldn't say, okay, well, what my doctor and what every other doctor says, which is, okay, we've done the PSA test and that's fine, but at least once a year we need to do a physical exam. Again, if you're just talking about a 78-year-old guy that is not running the free world, that's one thing. But if you're a White House physician and you have any man over 40 years old, are you not going to at least say, hey, once a year, like every other physician says, once a year, we need to do a physical exam and check? Because this is like one of the leading causes, one of the leading sicknesses for men over 40.
Yeah, I mean, Joe, I think 100%. And, did they do a digital rectal exam to assess his prostate? Again, typically that's done in the presence of symptoms. To your point, he's the leader of the free world. Did they do it and not characterize it? It's hard to know. We're speculating here. I would say in an abundance of caution, probably be holistic and comprehensive. That would make sense. It is interesting to note that President Trump's, President Obama's, and President Bush II, in their most recent physicals, in their terms of office, obviously 2025 for President Trump, did comment on their PSA levels. And so they got screened while in office, and they commented on it. It's not easy to access the most recent ones from President Biden. You can read summary articles. I couldn't access it on the archive site on the White House just before I came on. But according to those that were able to, there is not a report of a PSA test on the most recent physical that was read out for President Biden's last year in office. And so it's to say what was done, what was not done. You and I would be speculating, but the other three most recent occupants of the White House had it drawn, and it was reported out in the case.
There you go. And Dr. Gupta there with Joe Scarborough. Now, Scarborough kept saying that no matter what your PSA test, you get the physical test. That's not true.
No,
if
and I think the doctor corrected him on that.
Did.
It's in the case where you're symptomatic.
Yes.
Or
it's very high.
Yeah, or the PSA is very high.
Right.
Then, other indicators, then you move on to the digital test. So
Right. Both of ours are low, and I've never had
no.
I've never had the rubber glove.
No.
Or do they do it digital now? They said digital, so it's
which is finger. Yeah.
Oh, not a digital.
Not digital as in technology.
No.
Digital as in the digit on your hand.
Okay, see, I was hoping that they had advanced the technology.
Yeah.
Where he meant digital and as separate from digit.
Yes. No zeros or ones involved. Well, there's one involved.
It all depends.
Actually,
what the meaning
there's two involved.
It all depends what the meaning of digital is versus digit.
Yeah. No, it's refers to your digit on your hand. Yeah. The digital test, because saying the finger test isn't quite medical sounding enough.
I am so sorry that I asked for clarification on that.
Well,
very sorry that
always
I asked for
here to help.
Yeah. I want to play a little bit here. This is again Mark Halprin yesterday on his podcast, and just the beginning of it that I thought was appropriate to play now.
How could it be that this announcement occurs between the release of the Her audio and the book tomorrow? How could that possibly be, Hogan?
Well, I think all of this could have been solved if the press showed the slightest level of curiosity as related to this president or his administration. We'd know a lot of the questions you're kind of throwing out there had they cared to find out the answer. I don't know if they just didn't want to or didn't care. And either way, it's not good. But of course, in Washington, D.C., with the air thick with politics, I think it's pretty obvious in this tumultuous time and what's about to come out, the Her tapes, the book, as you just mentioned, doing something like this will obviously put the brakes on any reset that some journalists would try to do in going after and trying to find out more information. Now they're going to be scared of it. And I imagine stand down in a lot of instances when, in fact, this should only increase their level of questioning.
Well, so Dan, that's a good question. If this was done purposely to try to make him a more sympathetic figure and get less focus on the Her tapes and the book, it might have the opposite effect. Hogan says it should have the opposite effect. I think it might have the opposite effect. I think we saw for about 12 hours, even the New York Post paused scrutiny of Joe Biden and rounded up all the appropriate well wishes to him. But now the New York Post and others are looking at all the questions around this. And do you think that the press will or should pause scrutiny of Joe Biden because of this.
No, I don't think they should. Look, I will say this, like I'm as cynical as anyone, and I have been a huge critic of Joe Biden. If he was diagnosed with this after he left the White House, when they announce it is up to them. Good for them. Smart politics. Try to mat this down. If he had this as president, that is a different story. They did have an obligation to tell the country, just like they had an obligation to probably have him step down at some point in the last 2 years. But to me, yeah, okay, you're doing a smart political move. The guy didn't do many in 4 years, so like there's an irony that there's afterwards. But no, the press should ask a lot of questions. I mean, it is clear as day, Mark. We've talked about it for a while that he was not well those last 2 years.
It really doesn't matter. You mentioned the New York Post. MSNBC is all you have to say on Morning Joe.
Yeah.
You couldn't have gotten more specific than they did, because they got right into the PSA test and all that. And then was there another one? I didn't clear it because it's a podcast. I didn't clear it for on the air broadcast. I didn't go and listen to it before, but it was on Megyn Kelly's podcast, and she does curse on it. But she had a doctor on who said that you don't get to this point, and he was mentioning the fact that they said, this will respond to hormonal treatments, and he said they don't know that unless they've done it. That's how you know it,
right?
Because not everybody responds to it. And he said, so that to me is evidence.
They may use hormonal treatment, but if the patient responds, that's basically
right.
case by case.
And they're saying that the way that that they phrased it was that he has responded to it.
Right.
He said, well, they wouldn't know that by discovering it in one day.
Yeah, it's not going to respond that quickly.
Right. Right. So
yeah. And that tells you that therapy, then, if that is the case and that's what they're using, has been in place for a while.
Right.
If he indeed has responded to it one way or the other, then it takes a while for that to be determined. Which, again, goes back to the fact that, or the question about when he was diagnosed.
Yeah.
I mean,
it's really, and as we've said before, this isn't about Joe Biden.
No.
This is about who in the White House was controlling the White House.
Yep.
Who was doing part or a significant portion of all of Biden's job. Who was making the decisions, all the probably dozens, possibly hundreds of decisions you have to make every single day. Who was doing it? We know Joe Biden wasn't doing it all the time. And so at that particular point, you have a shadow government because you have the executive branch, the most powerful position in the world, which is not being handled by somebody who was elected by the American public.
Right. Yep. And how many actions were taken in that regard?
Exactly.
Which ones went into effect?
1,400 pardons. Did he go through 1,400 pardons? Anybody believe that Joe Biden went through and looked at 1,400 different pardons?
I mean, everything has to be reviewed.
And made the decisions on each and every one of them?
Right.
866-90 Red Eye.
We'll be right back with more Red Eye Radio with Eric Harley and Gary McNamara.
It's Red Eye Radio. He's Eric Harley, and I'm Gary McNamara. Oh, my gosh. Just took a look at the Babylon Bee, the headlines again. Oh. Alarming. Thanks to public school funding cuts, this 5-year-old student doesn't know all the variant sexual lusts adults can have.
Oh, wow.
And,
yeah.
They must have fun writing these headlines. These are just the headlines. These aren't like the bodies of the story at all.
Yeah, right.
And then this headline, Karine Jean-Pierre insists Joe Biden is cancer-free. Oh,
wow.
Wow.
Yeah.
And if you paid attention to any of the WNBA and Caitlin Clark the other day and all that controversy.
Yeah.
Caitlin Clark indicted for murder after fouling Angel Reese. That was my favorite one.
There might be consideration there. Yeah, right. Wow.
Gosh.
Always hard at work at the Babylon Bee.
Yeah, brutal.
Wow. It never ends. Yeah. I would love to sit in the room as they're writing. I would love to.
This is Red Eye Radio on Westwood One.